Real estate acquisitions and real estate development are very different disciplines that require a different set of knowledge and skills to evaluate opportunities. However, understanding both will give you a greater understanding of how the two work together in a property's life cycle and ultimately make you a more knowledgeable investor. There's a lot of material online for understanding the basics of real estate acquisitions, but frankly, development is more involved, and with that, it's harder to find information on the development side of the business that isn't way too complicated or overly simplified. My goal here is to give a middle-of-the-road education on real estate development that will give you the tools to further ask the right questions and advance your knowledge. So, at its most basic definition, acquisitions pertains to the purchase and operation of an existing building, whereas development pertains to the construction of a new building. When considering a new development project, there are generally two types of sites that you'll come across. A greenfield site, which would be the development of a piece of land that has not been previously developed, or a brownfield site, in which case you would typically acquire a lot that has some sort of structure on it and redevelop the lot by first demoing the existing structure. We see brownfield sites a lot in areas that were maybe older industrial sites, and as the city's gone through some gentrification, there may be a greater need for a new product type such as multifamily to add additional housing to an area. Now there are some academics that may come after me for oversimplifying the development process, but to start, we can consider three phases of a development project: pre-construction, construction, and operations. Within each of these three phases, there are several additional phases, and particularly in the pre-construction phase, it will largely depend on the type of parcel you've acquired and what needs to be done to prep the land for development. So I'm going to throw up a project life cycle diagram that we created to give a high-level overview and talk through some of the phases within those three main phases. The pre-construction phase begins well before you've even identified a parcel of land to develop. There's a whole set of market analysis phases that we'll cover in a later episode that'll help you decide if and what you want to develop in your market. So we're going to skip ahead and assume that you've done your market analysis, due diligence, and have identified a potential parcel to develop. One of the first things to do is to work with your engineering team to determine the first and best use of the land. Can the product you want to build even be built on the site? Is it the best use for the location? These are the questions that come top of mind, and they need to be answered right away when you come across a viable land parcel. Then you have to come up with the site concept. If it's an apartment building that you're constructing, how many units can you fit on the site? That's determined by zoning and usually done by number of units per acre. We call that unit density. What sort of amenities can you fit on the site? Is there a dog park? What's the parking situation going to be? How many spaces are required? These are all questions and part of the pre-construction conceptual phase before the land is even purchased. Once you've got your conceptual planning out of the way, you'll want to go ahead and purchase the land. Once you own the land, that's when all of the paper enhancements would occur. And when I say paper enhancements, I mean there may need to be some rezoning required to build what you want to build, and you'll also have to go through some approvals, and that's going to be done on a city-by-city basis. This phase is really why having local knowledge is critically important for the success of any real estate development project. Once you have plans in place, you know what you're building, and you've been approved to build it by the city, then it comes the actual development of the land. And there's two main types of development that we can kind of separate and talk about. You have your horizontal development, and then you have your vertical construction. Horizontal development consists of prepping the land for construction. So this is all of your underground utility work, your pads, maybe some road work. As you finish up your site work and you begin to transition into the vertical construction phase, this is also your time that you really give the marketing side of your business your full attention. A new building is kind of like starting a new business, and you have to market the business to attract customers, or in this case, new tenants. So during the construction process, you can actually get ahead of the game and pre-lease some or most of the building so you can lease up as quick as possible once the building is ready. The sooner tenants are in your building, the sooner the project will begin to generate income. Generally speaking, once the building reaches approximately 90% occupancy, that's when we consider the project a stabilized asset. Now when it comes to disposition or the exit strategy, this is something that first of all should be discussed at the very beginning of the project, because as a developer you're always working with the end in mind, and ideally you're always coming prepared with multiple exit strategies. And it's up to you and your business partners to determine what makes sense for your business. Some developers, all they do is make the paper enhancements and then they turn over a piece of land that's ready to be developed to other developers. Some developers will take it all the way through to completion, but then they sell it before the lease-up even begins. So they're selling it to a buyer who wants the end product, and they're willing to take the lease-up risk for you. And we'll take a much closer look at all of the various disposition options in another episode, But for now, I hope you've enjoyed this brief overview of real estate development. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next episode.